This is a recording with my very good friend Cameron John Robbins, the gentleman artist. And what we're proposing to do here is going to look through a series of portraits of historical figures as painted by the great man himself. And I will give my indications of what I see in a face. We will look both at the portraits and I will put some images then of those particular individuals beside them. And we'll discuss from both our perspectives and see where the lines meet. So, Cameron, it's over to you. I'm going to start sharing the screen and we'll choose the first image.
Okay.
Moving forward.
All right. Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy. So again, like with that first portrait of Washington, I was playing with an unfinished overall aesthetic with the portrait. And I really enjoy that, partly because it keeps the emphasis on the portrait itself, on the face itself. And so I'll kind of do a bit of a vignette around the face, but if we get bogged down too, as artists, get too deeply bogged down in details, sometimes it can be a painting about a dress or a suit of clothing that just happens to have a human head on top, And so when I'm doing portraits, I try to do everything I can to keep the emphasis on the main point, which is the portrait itself. Teddy Roosevelt, another colorful, hard-driving historical character. One of the most brilliant anecdotes about him is that he was shot during an assassination attempt while he was campaigning for his second, maybe, I don't know if he campaigned for a third presidency, but which was a thing at that allowable at that time. Anyway, somebody came up and shot him in the chest. And instead of going to the hospital, he went on and gave his campaign speech with a bullet in his chest. He just packed the wound and actually said it in his speech. It's like, I want you to understand right now that I've been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose. At the time, his political party was called the Moose Party. And so, I mean, bold and assertive and almost to the point of being outrageous, some of these stories. But again, like Grant and so many other, and Lincoln, many failures early on, very, very weak health as a young boy, and put himself where he needed to be to fix it and did what he needed to do to fix it. And so somebody who took his fate in his own hands and made himself what he was.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Moving on to the image, as you mentioned, he was quite a sickly child. He had known as for having a weak chest, and because I learned to use face reading as a diagnostic tool initially, the area of the cheeks would relate particularly to the lungs, and you can see certainly in the photograph what would be his left cheek is quite flat. So it would indicate that there was not necessarily so much that's not necessarily indicating a weakness, but it would indicate that the lung capacity was certainly less on that left side. So it's not surprising from a diagnostic perspective that chest would have been an issue for him. But as you say, he determined to take things into his own hands, and became very, very physically engaged later in life. And he was a man
Definitely robust.
Yeah, absolutely. Obviously, he had his Rough Riders in Cuba fighting the Spanish, and he was determined to be at the forefront of the action. So again, you see that going back to the idea of the nose. So what you see with him, and you'll see it later in at least one other portrait, you see the nose is relatively narrow at the beginning and then flares out. So it tells you this was a man. He would start slowly, but once he got momentum going, he really built up a head of steam. So you really had to work hard to keep up with him. And that was something that was innate within him. And he wasn't shy about putting his point of view forward. And he went from being the man of action with safaris, killing animals, and then the Rough Riders as well. But he was also the man behind the Yellowstone becoming a national park. That was largely,
Yes, the entire national park system in the United States has its roots with him.
Yeah. And
he was also a bare knuckle boxer for a time. So
yeah,
quite assertive and colorful.
Yeah, and of course you mentioned the word teddy at the beginning, so the teddy bear came from
yes
of Theodore
named after
Roosevelt.
him.
And one other piece on him here, and you'll notice his eyebrows are quite straight. So when you see that on somebody, it tells you this is somebody who's essentially very logical in how they approach things. So he obviously saw that there were certain challenges in his life in terms of the weak health, etc. But again, decided, force of will, he was going to change things.